All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Jon Alpert and Matthew O'Neill. Jon and Matthew are the directors of the Academy Award-nominated documentary short Redemption, which has its network debut Monday, October the 14th at 9:40 p.m. Eastern on HBO. You can find all about that at redemptionthemovie.com. Jon, Matt, thank you so much for being on the show.
What a pleasure.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, so Jon and Matt, Redemption is a documentary that follows the lives of several people living in New York City who collect cans and bottles from the garbage for the 5-cent deposit they can get for them. Let's begin by discussing what exactly was the inspiration for making this film.
The inspiration is this sort of mad genius, Sheila Nevins, who was head of documentary programming at HBO. And Sheila gets up at 7 o'clock in the morning and starts thinking about the world. And when she looked out at the world one day, across the street from where she lived, she saw somebody rifling through the garbage. And then on the next corner, there was another person going through the garbage. And everywhere she looked, people were basically gleaning for our table scraps in order to survive. And when she came to Matt and I and said, will you guys look into this? We were aware that in our neighborhood, because all the factories have closed down, we are in Chinatown in New York City, the restaurants are in a lot of trouble, that many of the people who formerly had what we would think would be normal jobs in order to survive have to go through the garbage. And it's become an army. It's probably the fastest growing job in New York City, people going through the garbage collecting cans and bottles.
Jon and I have reported stories all over the world. I mean, some of the other films that we've done have been in Egypt and Iraq and Afghanistan, and everywhere we go around the world, we've seen people going through the trash to survive. It's something that, to a certain degree, is almost a cliche in terms of documentary filmmaking. There's been great documentary films about garbage pickers in Cairo, trash workers in Brazil, and to see this sort of subsistence survival happening right here in our city, I think is an important narrative that we all need to understand when most of what you hear about New York City is about the gleaming real estate and Bloomberg safe New York and the bike paths. And there's a real truth to this. You know, almost half of New Yorkers are living at or below the poverty line. And that's a story of what's happening in New York that we need to pay attention to, because the people who you meet in the movie Redemption, they're not the sort of drug addicts and alcoholics that were, that people used to think were the people who survived collecting bottles and cans. These are working men and women who work as hard as you or as hard as me, really harder than me, struggling to survive.
No, and I think that's actually something that's so amazing about the film, and I'm happy I got to see it this last week, because it's such a powerful piece, and you guys, you deserve the nomination. You deserve to win. I'll just tell you right there. You should have won.
Too late, Matt.
But, yeah,
you can't rewind that clock.
But I mean, there is that myth that in the country that if you're homeless, you're just lazy and you're a bum or whatever, and you're not working hard. There is no way you can watch this film and look at these people who are doing this canning and say that they're not working hard. I mean, many of them are doing this for like 20 plus hours a day.
Well, I'd challenge Paul Ryan or John Boehner or anybody who would talk about how people who need to work harder to go head to head with Lily, the Chinese woman who is collecting cans in our film. Because John and I both at different times thought, Lily, she's sort of older, she's this tiny little Chinese woman, she's twice my age and half my weight. So I thought I could pull her big shopping cart full of bottles and cans across Lower Manhattan for her, because she does it every day. And I thought, Lily, let me step in. When I grabbed those reins and started pulling it down Houston Street across, trying to get from the west side over to Chinatown, it was unbelievable. It was exhausting. You're navigating the potholes, you're hauling this thing, and eventually what happened? Lily said, Matt, give me the cart.
I had a similar experience. I went off in one direction with my camera. This is down on Wall Street, and there were a bunch of sort of nighttime street people who were watching me go off with Lily. When we got to her cart, I tried to help her and managed to upend the cart and destroy about $30 or $40 worth of bottles, breaking them and scattering them all over the street.
Wow.
But I was pushing the cart up a hill there, and these guys saw me going one way with the camera, and coming back with the shopping cart full of bottles and cans. And they said, "Hey, yo, man, what happened? What happened? I thought you were filming." I said, "Yeah, I got downsized." And they said, "Oh, too. We all get downsized down here." And I mean, that's really what's going on in New York City. The bottom part of the economy is really getting steamrolled. The top part of the economy is chugging along really great. But people who are in our film really have been left behind, but they're not the type of people who just sort of sit there. They're out working in order to put food on their tables.
One of the more interesting quotes from the film, and again, I'm talking to Jon Alpert and Matthew O'Neill. They are the directors of the film Redemption, which will air Monday, October 14th on HBO. One of the more interesting quotes, it's actually from Lily, the woman you were just talking about. And one of the quotes that really struck me in the film was the quote was, when restaurants and the sweatshops close, the workers have to start collecting cans. And like the restaurant thing, you know, that makes sense. But then, like, when you think about that, even that you know, as a progressive person in America, you're like, oh yeah, the sweatshops. We really shouldn't have sweatshop labor, you know, anywhere in the world, especially in the U.S. But then it's like, wait a second, the fact that their lives were actually better working in these sweatshops than they are now, it really just sort of strikes you. It's just like, you know, just the whole. How even just as bad as it was for these sweatshop workers, it actually got worse for them.
Yeah. You know, in our neighborhood, all the buildings that surround our center, and we're in an old firehouse, are loft buildings, and from ground floor to top floor, they were full of sweatshops. They were garment factories. And these factories were unionized, but the pay was quite low, but the work was available, and it was available 24 hours a day. The hum of the machines was sort of the music of our neighborhood, and we could be walking down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we could hear the sewing machines going, and we could, you know, peek in the windows and see people bent over the sewing machines making the clothes that wound up at Macy's, at Bloomingdale's. Almost every single one. There were I think 30,000 garment factory jobs here in Manhattan. We're down to around 1,000 now, and the jobs have been exported.
The manufacturing jobs that used to be in New York City are gone. We did another film that was basically about the economy in New York called No Contract, No Cookies. It was about the Stelladora workers at the Stelladora cookie factory in the Bronx and their fight to survive after they were taken over by a venture capital firm. And those workers came from every country around the world and came to New York for a better life and a leg up. And they were making a middle-class lifestyle in New York, and they were able to send their kids to school and on to a college education, and it was the immigrant dream in America. And I think that what you see in Redemption is the new reality for people at the bottom of the economic food chain. Nuve, who is an immigrant from Ecuador, who's in the film, who is struggling to make ends meet and supporting her family collecting bottles and cans. She wants to work. She'd take a job in a factory if there was one, but there aren't anymore. There aren't those economic opportunities in New York City. There aren't that. The first rung of the ladder is impossible to reach. So now, hardworking, intelligent people who are coming here for the American dream are digging through the trash instead.